And we haven't really done a Neocon update in a while. I don't think we've really done one ever, but I mean, we used to talk about them constantly. I was fairly obsessed with neoconservatives. I made a 3-part documentary film called The Very Heavy Agenda about it. You can still get it online, streaming, rent it, download it, or buy it on DVD. Little plug there for it. But yeah, I mean, there's just been a lot of stuff that's been happening. And I noticed the term neocon has come back into the popular sphere of discussion. A lot more people are using the term neocon now from the right and the left. A lot of the people on the right are using it disingenuously. I actually saw somebody from Newsmax, I think I discussed this on the last episode, bashing the neocons on Twitter, which to me is just insanely hypocritical because Newsmax is a neoconservative propaganda pushing outlet that used to bring on Bill Kristol, Kirchick, Edelman constantly. You see the word being used a lot right now, but I guess let's start with someone who seems like she is the new neocon surrogate replacement for a new neocon, Jamie Kirchick, who was like really hot back in like 2014, 2013. This woman named Bari Weiss, who is a New York Times writer. She went on Joe Rogan recently to basically indirectly bash you and accuse you of being an anti-Semite in a roundabout way.
And let's preempt this by saying she's also the author of the acclaimed intellectual dark web piece in New York Times where you saw Sam Harris and Jordan Peterson like hiding behind like dark palm fronds in like the forest. Because her whole thesis was that these people are so marginalized in the mainstream that they have to go on programs like Joe Rogan to really get their views out because mainstream has shunned them because they're too controversial. No.
And
I think the mainstream has shunned ideas
too,
like race science. Yeah. Ideas. I don't know if Ben Shapiro was put in there. I would not be surprised though. Jesus Christ. But these people, that's like aside the point that these people are not shunned from the mainstream. They have total platforms everywhere. HBO, Bill Maher, Fox News. I see them everywhere. So I don't understand that premise of like these people are so marginalized that they have to go on Joe Rogan to get it out there. And that's why they're part of this intellectual dark web. But the funny thing about that article is that she popped me in there because obviously she's so upset at what I said about Palestine on Joe Rogan's show because it was really the biggest platform I've ever given to that topic. And I really went really hard for about 30 minutes straight, 2 times. And she was so upset about that, she had to throw me in there and say, yeah, but Joe also has on people like this, Abby Martin, who is crazy and defends Bashar al-Assad and is just nuts. And she's a conspiracy theorist. So she like, what was really fascinating about that is ever since I went on Joe Rogan, the pro-Israel lobby and organizations have been trying desperately to get on someone to like quote unquote counter me, you know? And they were lobbying very hard for the last year. Yeah. They were lobbying him. And so that's why that's what I think kind of happened, that Bari Weiss got it in her head, like, I need to go on now. And so that's what she did. She wanted to go on and quote unquote correct the record about Israel. And she fucking failed miserably.
Yeah,
it was
she dodged
embarrassing.
She did a total roundabout dodge and made it seem like she's actually really critical of Israel, but she thinks the people who are genuinely critical, because she's obviously not, she's lying when she says that, the people who are genuinely critical and focused on Israel being an apartheid state are suspiciously focused on it, meaning they're actually anti-Semitic. So at first she opens it by saying that notion that, you know, that accusation that people who criticize Israel are accused of being anti-Semitic, that's BS. But I think there's a real problem with the suspicious, like, over focus on it. It's like, so literally she is saying what she just said was BS. She's so disingenuous and hypocritical and makes me think that she is trained by neoconservative think tanks. Like, it doesn't just sound like...
I didn't get that from her. She was a really bad version of Kirchick. If this is their way to try to rebrand neoconservatism, they're like doing a piss poor job.
They are.
She was inarticulate, kind of dumb, frankly. I mean, I hate to say that, but it really was true. I was really kind of ashamed for her because that's the one thing. Love him or hate him, Joe Rogan really does kind of allow people to fall on their own sword.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, like Candace Owens really revealed herself to be a complete moron. And this was another instance where someone who's a New York Times editorialist, she can't articulate herself or back up anything she says. It's kind of this mantra in DC where other neoliberal, imperialists like say something so then it's true. Like that's what I got from her is like, oh, your friends and colleagues at the New York Times say this, therefore this is this. And you saw that time and again. Like, for example, Joe brought up my Palestine reporting. He was like, yeah, I've seen some really crazy stuff. Abby went there and showed me some insane stuff. And then she was like, other countries, like, she's like, what about the genocide in China? Like, what about the genocide in China?
Oh, the Uyghurs.
Yeah. And it was like, wait, but hold on, though, Barry, because there's a genocide going on in Palestine. And there's a concentration camp there. So you want to talk about concentration camps in China. We're not talking about that, though. We're talking about this.
And it's not even, it's first of all, she says genocide, which is...
It's completely absurd.
Completely made up. But the idea that these are concentration camps is also a highly distorted, strangely left-baiting neocon talking point. Mm-hmm. Let's just get that out of the way. Mm-hmm. Just like the Tucker Carlson Antifa protest was some kind of act of terrorism, was some kind of right-wing talking point op. This is a fucking op being circulated throughout the left.
And it's sheer whataboutism. Yeah, whataboutism.
And the same suspicious characters who have a sheep-dippy spook quality to them are the ones pushing this the hardest. The same quote-unquote leftists who talk about how everybody's an Assadist and a tanky are the ones pushing this thing.
Yeah, and her whole argument was other countries do bad things too, and the occupation essentially can't end because Palestinians would kill everyone. That's what she was like, I'd love to end the occupation, but we can't. Don't you see Hamas is a death cult? They lynch people. What's funny is she's acting like, she claims that she was in the West Bank and she covers it fairly. I was in the West Bank for a month. I didn't hear anything about Hamas. First of all, she claims that like people are lynching people in the West Bank. That's insane.
I remember hearing that and thinking she's just pulling this out of her ass. I've never
straight up pulling it out of her ass. And it's like, I would have happily reported on, if I heard anything like that going on, like that would have been part of the story. The thing is that doesn't exist. So it was totally pulling it out of her ass. And again, just deflecting everything about Israel's war crimes and daily atrocities to Hamas is bad and China has this and people must be anti-Semitic if they harp on Israel in a disproportionate fashion. And it's like, hold on. I'm pretty sure that Israel is unique. First of all, it's a country wholly subsidized by our government and military. Yeah. So let's get that out of the way. It's basically just a proxy of the U.S. government. It's basically our country too, because we pay for it, and it's an arm of us. So yeah, we do have the fucking right and the duty, Barry. And then on top of that, yeah, it is pretty crazy. I don't see any other countries that are based on the, on apartheid regime, based on the daily theft of indigenous land, and implementing not only a colonial occupation that's illegal under international law, but maintaining a brutal siege of 2 million people. That's going to be uninhabitable in a year, that they're sniping children and medics and amputees. That actually isn't happening anywhere else in the world. So, like, why are you so focused on Israel?
Yeah, I mean, it's just so obvious that what she's trying to do. And I think the reason why we included her on this Neocon update is because she does seem like she is sort of a Neocon emissary. As dumb as she came off that interview, she does seem to be like the new Jamie Kirchick, and the fact that she's associated herself and given this sort of name, the intellectual dark web, to these figures, it seems like a deliberate attempt for like neoconservative ideology to sort of infiltrate or attach itself to those sort of forces. And I only saw a hint of this happening a couple of years ago, where there was someone from the American Enterprise Institute, an older woman, I don't remember her name, who's also very close with Bill Kristol, who was writing a lot of papers for the American Enterprise Institute on like social justice warriors and trans issues and things like that, and how the liberal movement is hypocritical on these issues about race. And she actually went on tour with Milo Yiannopoulos and Steven Crowder a couple of years ago. So I kind of see Bari Weiss as trying to do something similar, where it's like there is, we've gotten so used to the neocons trying to merge with the liberal class and like anti-racism and stuff like that. But there's another side of it too. Neoconservatism is a virus. So it doesn't just stay in one area, it spreads. And this Bari Weiss figure seems to be trying to spread it and include people like Sam Harris and like create a little like collective and elevate them too. Like Jordan Peterson is like not just a fringe YouTube figure. He's got like monk debates now and stuff. And he's being included in think tank talks at like the CFR and stuff like that. So this is not
unbelievable.
Yeah, so there's some weird merger on that end happening too. So I don't know. I mean, I think that's why this sort of fits in the neoconservative.
Yeah, and plus she's the anti-Trumper, anti-wall, pro-Zionist, like weird neocon. So it's like playing on liberals' heartstrings and using all these weird arguments that the neocons have rebranded
classical
themselves
liberal,
into.
Abby.
Yeah,
She's a classical liberal like Dave Rubin.
So she's kind of she's like the firebrand generation of the neocons rebranding for goddamn fourth iteration.
They've adopted tactics from like newer marketing and social media, and they're like, why just do one new iteration update? Like, why not just do like a bunch of them at once? Update and do like an iteration for every genre out there. I mean, why not?
No, I was just going to say really quickly about Bari Weiss. I love her existence because she's known for just being trolled. It's like she's known for her absolute shit takes. And now that I know actually how she can articulate herself and explain her views, she's so pathetic. She's really one of those people that like you really should stick with just writing.
Yeah.
Because you cannot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, there are some people like that, who are great writers. And I'm not saying she's a great writer by any means. I mean, even Jimmy Kirchick's a better writer, and his purple prose and like abuse of purple prose was like out of control in his writings. He was a fucking hack.
What I was pleased to see, and when she went on there, I was like, oh my God, this is bad because Joe Rogan's audience is going to hate her, not because they hate her politics, but because they see her as like an establishment hack, and they already get that kind of right-wing meat injected in their brain from the Jordan Petersons, from the Ben Shapiros, from the Steven Crowders. So it's like having this kind of like intellectualized version of that doesn't jive with them. And it indeed didn't because she got actually the most downvotes out of any guest he's ever had on.
Yeah.
I thought I had the most downvotes by having half down, half up. And she got like, I don't know, like 75%. Yeah. So that's what's funny about it.
And I think Joe Rogan's audience, like they're savvy enough to know when someone from like the establishment is coming on to just spout propaganda. Because not saying that Jordan Peterson's not establishment, but it's like, it's like it's just too obvious when
it's like we're talking about the establishment, like straight up New York Times.
But speaking of different genres of the things neocons are moving into and trying and exploring, woke Bill Kristol is now a thing. That Bill Kristol is woke. On the Beat, a terrible show on MSNBC that probably no one watches with Ari Melber. Bill Kristol and 90s R&B hip-hop artist Fat Joe had a bromance. And Ari Melber is showing hilarious little short vignette about how Fat Joe and Bill Kristol are the best of buds and they're going to get along and fight Trump together.
Bill and Joe, cool. It really did feel like they were pitching a reality show. It was so forced, so weird. It was like, you're telling me Fat Joe is friends with Bill Kristol? Like, what are you talking about? This is obviously like some weird PR stunt.
Yeah, and you can watch the video. We'll link to it on the timeline. It's just insane because there's an actual print headline on MSNBC right now. Aside from the video we just described, you can click on a link and read a story on MSNBC with the headline literally titled, "Woke Bill Kristol and Fat Joe Cruise New York." And it just shows them like walking around New York talking to people on camera.
They're cruising, dude. Fat Joe and Bill Kristol cruise together.
Yeah.
Cruising with Kristol and Joe and Fat Joe.
And you know what? It's hilarious to me that Bill Kristol, and I don't know if you saw this, the MAGA hat kid in the face of the Native American guy, Bill Kristol was like, it's too bad John McCain isn't here to tell Trump how to take a moral stand in this issue against like, you know, a heroic like Native American figure. And I was thinking, dude, John McCain said that he will never forgive the gooks for as long as he lives.
Right.
What are you talking about? So, I mean, and Bill Kristol's smart enough to know that John McCain was a racist, that he had Sarah Palin as his VP. So what is Bill Kristol actually doing? I think that he's actually playing games now at this point, totally cynically rebranding like a chameleon because he's already gotten away with this. It's almost like he's abusing it because he was able to do it so well over the past few years that he's just like, fuck it. I'm just going to be like my dad now and be like, I'm a neo-Marxist now. Like, how do we know next year he's not going to be like, I'm a socialist?
Right.
I mean, that's how crazy it's like. His dad goes through all those things and he's like, people used to call me a Stalinist, a neo-Marxist, a neo-Leninist, a neo-conservative, a neoliberal.
A Trotskyite.
Yeah, it's like, so what does that actually mean? Irving Kristol was being paid by the CIA, my friends. I mean, what is he actually doing? Who goes through that many different iterations?
But you always hear that, though, like, oh, you were liberal when you were dumb, and then you're conservative when you grow a brain. And it's like, it's kind of like a weird...
But this is like on a whole other level of chameleon morphine. It's like it's like the secret character in Mortal Kombat, Chameleon, that keeps flashing like randomly to the different ninja characters.
Well, because they believe that legitimizes their policy now. It's like, no, we used to think like you idiots.
No, but I mean, in Bill Kristol's case, it's so transparently fake.
Yeah.
That's what's so interesting about it, that but then again, MSNBC to promote him to this level is very odd.
I mean, it seems like Bill Kristol just every day he just paraded around the mainstream media.
He's bigger than he's ever been right now. And I never thought I would say that. I mean, he was still kind of a scourge, disliked when he would go on appearances. People would spar with him all the time. When I was making a very heavy agenda 2-3 years ago. Not anymore. He's completely accepted and loved.
I mean, it really is one of the most surreal, bizarre things about this era that we're living in.
Yeah.
Is the rebranding and reacceptance and open embrace for neoconservatives.
Yeah, and how they all are still acting like Trump is the worst thing ever for them. Or just like how he's pulling away from the world order. He's a isolationist. I mean, it's really nuts. One of the things that I think has gotten lost in all this, because all the neocons seem to hate Trump so much, is that there is an actual class of neocon outliers who's actually pro-Trump. There was a split over the past couple of years. They split off into pro and anti-Trump. There's a lot more anti-Trump figures, but there are, a few really important pro-Trump figures in there as well.
Right. Like, tell us who. I
mean, some of those outliers are described in an article for the New York Review of Books by Stephen Wertheim. And his article is actually titled, the long title for it is, Donald Trump has rescued neoconservatism, allowing some neocons to regain respectability by opposing him, while revitalizing the neocon policy agenda from the White House. So I think that sums it up quite well on kind of both sides. And he goes through both ends of that neocon spectrum. How the neocon foreign policy agenda in some ways is thriving in the White House, while there's a class of neocons who oppose Trump who are actually legitimizing him in the process by opposing him. So I think it's a great article. We'll link to it on the timeline. But some of those neocons, I mean, we've already talked to him about them a lot, include people like Bill Bennett from PNAC, James Woolsey from PNAC, Michael Ledeen from PNAC, Frank Gaffney. These are all neocons who used to be part of PNAC that are actually pro-Trump and not anti-Trump. So that needs to be...
Unbelievable. It really flies in the face of that narrative, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it needs to be looked into more closely by people who claim to be anti-neocon. I mean, Donald Trump Jr. today was just retweeting Uncle Jimbo a bunch of times. Uncle Jimbo was Frank Gaffney's right-hand man for his Center for Security Policy think tank, I think it was called. His anti-Muslim think tank.
It's just another cute talking point for this anti-interventionist, Trump apologist crowd.
Yeah.
To just say, like, we hate neocons. Neocons are bad. But it's like they just ignore all the neocons who are aligned with Trump and who Trump promotes. So,
of course.
It's just meaningless.
And then on January 9th, Prop or Not, that mysterious, shadowy organization that got mysteriously boosted by a Washington Post story making a blacklist of alternative media websites that were Russian propaganda. They had a Twitter tantrum, Prop or Not had a Twitter tantrum about the word neocon and went on a multiple-part thread about how the word neocon is actually a Russian disinfo psyop planted by the Russian government.
Excuse me?
Yeah. So that's how stupid this has all become.
What was the what did they even devolve into?
I don't even know. I mean, I don't have the thread up in front of me, but that was the gist of what they were saying.
Just like how they were saying, if you say the word neocon, you really mean Jew, and it's like, what do you?
Did they say that
what are you
too?
guys talking about? No, not proper,
Yeah.
not, but just like that was the whole critique on
of course.
critiquing the Bush administration.
Yeah,
it's
and
like,
that's
okay.
been something that they've been trying to push for a long, long time.
But this is a new one where it's like now it just is a Russian propaganda talking point. It's like, oh, really? I didn't realize Russia was meddling and fomenting discord. Oh, during the Bush administration, even planting the word neocon. Oh, cool.
Yeah. So Irving Kristol was a time-traveling Russian disinfo agent who coined the term to destroy reality on behalf of a Russian psyop under Putin.
Fascinating.
A couple days after that weird Twitter thing came out, on January 12th, Jacob Halperin writes an article for the Washington Monthly with the title, "Neocons Paved the Way for Trump, Finally One Admits It." This was a sort of thesis that I had in A Very Heavy Agenda Part 3, is that the neocons are to blame for Trump and the monster sort of hawkishness that he represented. You know, that he talked about wanting to kill Muslims and their families and that kind of thing. And that also they paved the way for it by creating such a terrible smirk on, you know, America's standing with the Iraq War that Trump could so easily oppose it. So they paved it in multiple ways, you know, and make the establishment look bad by opposing such a horrific thing they had done. So this article is interesting. He gives Max Boot, though, way too much of a free pass. And I don't think Max Boot really does admit that he's responsible for paving the way for Trump. But what Max Boot's doing is interesting, too. Just like Bill Kristol, he is virtue signaling his way into trying to represent himself as being a liberal. He's actually saying he's no longer even a conservative in this article, which is fascinating.
Wow.
So that's just, you know, completely phony. You know, Max Boot is someone who is very closely associated also with the Institute for the Study of War. He's good friends with Kim Kagan, you know, one of the biggest military-industrial complex funded think tanks in D.C. that does nothing but push for war and analyze war. A couple other neocon-related things having to do with media censorship, soft censorship that's happened recently. There is this thing that's being written about more recently called Integrity Initiative in the UK, a state-sponsored disinformation fighting apparatus. There was an informative interview about it with guest Mohammed El-Mazi on the Around the Empire podcast. I'm discussing exactly what this is, and he breaks it all down. People should go check that out. And that kind of goes along with all these other, you know, disinformation fighting things that we've seen recently that go along with things like the Alliance for Securing Democracy, this neocon think tank that sort of tries to analyze the data flow of Russian disinformation bots online, they claim, by analyzing Twitter accounts, even though they won't disclose what the bots are. But NewsGuard is something new. It's kind of a newer iteration, the newest evolution in this sort of stifling information online, soft censorship. It is a new company that specializes in prop or not fake news watchdog style filtering of what they call fake news. It's actually a web extension plugin that shows you a color-coded grade for every news resource hyperlink or news website that you're on.
Unbelievable.
They give RT a red rating and Voice of America a green rating.
Who's behind it?
Who's behind it? Well, people who sit on their board include Tom Ridge, Michael Hayden, and Obama advisor Richard Stengel. They also give Fox News a green rating and Drudge Report a red rating, which is interesting. It is basically the people who are behind this company say it is designed to replace Google, Facebook, and Twitter's internal fake news auditing departments. That it's meant to be like a sourced out thing that these companies can sort of pass the responsibility on to. And we just did an interview with Whitney Webb of Mint Press News, who just did a big expose on NewsGuard, what this is. And she sort of deduces that it's actually really convenient for these companies if they can have a company like NewsGuard, because then these companies aren't directly responsible for what they decide to filter out. They can pass the blame on to someone else. So that's a kind of a smart idea if that's what this is going to evolve into. Definitely check out that previous episode of Media Roots Radio that we did.
I just wanted to say something about that really quick. It's so frustrating because it's like the notion of this is genius, try to have some sort of like extension that really filters and helps your media literacy understand what's fake news and what's not. And it's just so sinister that these corporations align with like CIA officials yet again, and working with tech companies are doing this to weed out alternative media and crush dissenting voices under the guise of media literacy. It's shocking because so many people are going to download this, thinking like wanting to get a more honest views and more honest news because they don't understand how the media works and how it censors things. So it's just like now we're up against a much bigger wall to try to, explain what's going on and get our information out there. I can't recommend DuckDuckGo enough as an extension as well because it removes all the algorithms and you can still use search engines. But if you have DuckDuckGo accompanying it, all the algorithms are gone. So you'll have a raw feed of search results in your area without any interference.
Yeah.
So that's
but
what
that
I
still
use,
probably doesn't change the fact that Google is deliberately deranking alternative news websites.
Right.
So we don't even know really what's under the hood is going on there. We can just tell how much it's changed, especially YouTube. YouTube is the most obvious. So I've actually heard an interesting suggestion. Since Google's search engine is still better than the YouTube search engine, somebody suggested using Google or another search engine to search YouTube for results. Like if you're looking for specific videos, because the YouTube search engine itself internally is fucked. Like they've totally ruined it.
I just tried to look up Robbie Martin meets the Venezuelan opposition and it didn't even show up in the first.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, all that shit would have showed up even for when I was doing this Anthrax podcast. And by the way, that's still in progress, part 2 of that. But even when I was trying to do that, I was finding it extremely difficult to find clips that I would always know what to search for to find them as the number one result. Like I had to go, I couldn't even find them anymore. Really obvious that they've doctored the search results to hide alternative media or anything deemed now 9/11 conspiracy related. They actually put a Wikipedia link to 9/11 on my American Anthrax film. So that's what they do now.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Yeah, explain what that is because that's crazy. I just saw that on another video that I was watching.
Well, they didn't, it kind of went under the radar, what I'm describing, but they had already announced, and it was in the news, that they were going to start saying that companies like Telesur or Al Jazeera or Russia Today, they were going to put a disclaimer saying this, if it's for Russia Today, it would say this channel is wholly or partially funded by the Russian government in big letters underneath the video. So that's already something that's been happening for a while. But then they started doing things to like conspiracy videos.
Yep.
Or videos that were taking an alternative point of view on 9/11, for example. They would link to actually, not the Wikipedia entry, the Encyclopedia Britannica entry for 9/11.
It's so bizarre.
It is very bizarre. And I only noticed that because it was on one of my videos about anthrax, the anthrax attacks.
Oh my God. So yeah, if you just mention 9/11 as like a keyword or a tag, it's just going to throw up the Encyclopedia Britannica like definition of 9/11.
Yeah, it's very, very convenient, I guess.
Strange.
I don't even know. I mean,
it would make more sense if it was Wikipedia, though. Like if Jimmy
would.
Wales some sort of had this partnership with YouTube.
Yeah, it would make more sense.
It's just so ruined.